If you already played Super Mario Bros. Wonder back in 2023, you should probably wait before buying this new version. Even if you haven't played it yet, there's still a bit of a conversation to be had here. Because Super Mario Bros. Wonder Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus Meetup in Bellabel Park is one of those releases that sounds bigger than it actually is. It looks like a definitive edition. It sounds like it adds meaningful new content. But once you actually get into it, you start to realize most of what's new feels like padding than a true expansion. So the big question is simple. Is this worth your money right now? Or is this one you hold off on? Let's get into it. Super Mario Bros. Wonder originally released in 2023, and it was a pretty big deal. After almost 2 decades of the new Super Mario Bros. Formula, this was Nintendo finally shaking things up for 2D Mario. New art direction, more expressive animations, and most importantly, the Wonder Flower system, which basically turned every level into something unpredictable. It gave the game this constant sense of surprise that the series had been missing for a very long time. Now, fast forward to this new version on Switch 2. This is essentially a bundled package. You've got the full base game, a slight visual upgrade with higher resolution and HDR support, and then a chunk of new content centered around Bellabel Park. That includes remixed levels, some extra bosses, new playable options like Rosalina, and a suite of multiplayer modes that lean into more of a party game structure. On paper, it sounds like a pretty solid upgrade. In reality, it's a bit more complicated than that. So, let's start with the obvious. Wonder is still fantastic, don't get me wrong. Even 3 years later, the base game absolutely holds up. The level design is so creative, the pacing is tight, and the Wonder Flower mechanic still does a great job of keeping things fresh from start to finish. It avoids that repetitive feeling that plagued the older, new series, where worlds started to blur together. Here, almost every level has its own identity, its own twist, and that alone makes replaying the game genuinely enjoyable. And that's kind of the biggest strength of the Switch 2 edition. It gives you an excuse to revisit a really good game. The visual upgrades are nice, even if they're not dramatic. The bump in resolution and the addition of HDR make everything pop just a little bit more. It's not transformative, but it is clean, polished, and exactly what you'd expect from a next-gen refresh. Then you've got the Bellabel Park editions, specifically the Koopa side content. This is probably the best part of what's actually new. The idea is that you revisit levels that have been altered using Bowser's Wonder powers. They're stripped down, more combat-focused, and lead into new boss fights against the Koopalings. And while the levels themselves are pretty quick, and honestly a bit underwhelming, the boss fights are actually great. They're still easy. This isn't suddenly turning into a hardcore Mario game, but they're way more creative than your typical jump on their head 3 times setup. Stuff like a giant puppet version of Morton or a constantly evolving Wendy fight actually feels like Nintendo having fun with the Wonder concept again. There are also smaller additions that are just, nice. Rosalina being playable is cool, even if it feels a bit like a tie-in move. New badges and new flower pot power-up, some extra challenge modes. None of it is groundbreaking, but it adds a bit more variety. And to be fair, the new accessibility options are genuinely good. The assist mode and co-star Luma option make the game way more approachable for less experienced players or for co-op sessions where not everyone is at the same skill level. So, to sum it all up, yes, there is value. It's just not as much as you expect. This is where things start to fall apart a bit, and why this is a wait recommendation instead of a straight up buy. The biggest issue is simple. Most of the new content just feels unnecessary. Not bad, just unnecessary. Take the Bellabel Park level remixes. They do sound interesting, but in practice, they're extremely short and stripped back. There's no collectibles, not much to explore. You just kind of run through them and you're done. It doesn't feel like meaningful new levels. It feels like slightly altered versions of things you've already played. Then there's Camp Central and the Toad Brigade challenges. 74 challenges sounds like a lot. And to be fair, some of them are actually pretty tough and engaging. But structurally, they're just remixing existing content with extra conditions, time limits, enemy restrictions, things like that. So again, it leans heavily on repetition. And then we get to the biggest addition, Attraction Central. Now, this is clearly Nintendo trying to inject a multiplayer, party-style mode into Wonder. You got minigames, online and local play, and even a tour system that chains multiple events together like a mini Mario Party session. And look, it's fine, and that's kind of the problem. The minigames are perfectly functional. Some are even mildly fun, but they never really evolve beyond that. Whether you're collecting coins, racing to the finish, or doing co-op challenges like guiding a bob-omb or moving in sync, it actually feels very surface level. Nothing here is deep enough to keep you coming back. And more importantly, it feels completely out of place. Wonder is a tight, focused platformer. These party elements feel like they were bolted on after the fact, rather than being something the game was built around. If you want a party experience, there are just better options out there. This isn't replacing Mario Party, and it's definitely not becoming your go-to game night pick. Even the online modes struggle because everything ends so quickly. You barely get into the rhythm of a match before it's already over. And then there's the reward system, earning water droplets to grow flowers in Bellabel Park. It's there, but it's not compelling. It doesn't feel meaningful enough to motivate you to keep playing these modes. When you step back and look at all of it, it really does feel like these additions exist mainly to justify the Switch 2 edition label and the higher price tag, obviously. And that's the core issue here. This doesn't feel like an expansion, it feels like a repackaging. So, who should actually consider picking this up? If you've never played Super Mario Bros. Wonder before, this is still a great game, full stop. Even with all the criticisms, the base experience alone is worth your time. So if this is your first exposure, you're still getting one of the best 2D Mario games in years. That said, even in that scenario, you might still want to wait, especially if pricing is a factor, because what you're really paying extra for here isn't all that essential. Now, if you already played Wonder on the original Switch, this becomes a much easier call. There's very little here that justifies jumping back in at full price. The new bosses are fun, Rosalina is a nice addition, and the visual upgrade is clean, but none of it feels substantial enough to warrant a double dip. And if you're someone looking for a multiplayer party experience, this is not the game for you. The Attraction Central stuff is too shallow to compete with dedicated party games, and it doesn't integrate well enough with the core experience to feel essential. So, let's bring it all together. This is a wait before you buy. Not because Super Mario Bros. Wonder isn't great, it absolutely is. But because this specific version doesn't do enough to justify jumping in right now, especially at a premium price. If you've already played the original, you can safely skip this for now. You're not missing anything major. If you haven't played it yet, This is still a fantastic entry point, but you might as well wait for a sale or a price drop because the extra content here doesn't significantly enhance the experience. This feels less like a must-have upgrade and more like an optional re-release. But at the end of the day, Super Mario Bros. Wonder Switch 2 Edition plus Meetup in Bellabel Park is a bit of a mixed bag. It reminds you just how good the original game is, but it also highlights how little needed to be added in the first place. The new content isn't bad, it's just not meaningful enough. And when you're asking players to come back or to pay more for a definitive version, that extra content needs to feel essential. Here, it just doesn't do that. But then again, that is just my take. If you've already picked it up, I'd love to hear what you think about the new additions. Are you actually spending time in the multiplayer modes, or did you bounce off them like I did? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy this kind of breakdown, helping you decide whether a game is worth your money right now, make sure you subscribe to Controller Culture. We've got a lot more coming. And as always, I'll see you all in the next one.